Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to be here in another episode with you. And this time I have an amazing sister that we just reconnected. So she is Linzi Schreiner's the owner of Peace, Love, and Yoga in Tonganoxie, Kansas. And so excited for you to be here. Thank you for joining
Yay.
us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here too.
Oh,
A
it's
little
such a
nervous,
pleasure.
but really excited.
I think that's kind of normal, when we go into somebody else's show, it's like, oh, shoot.
Yeah. Well, I've never been on a podcast and I think this is exciting. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yay, of course. So I love to open up the space just by breathing. So then we get into our own fields and also the ones that are listening or watching the video. So I invite you to close your eyes if that feels safe for you. If not, you can just look at one point in front of you and just gaze. Let's take a deep inhale through the nose. Exhale fully through the nose. Deep inhale. And deep exhale. Let's do it one more time. Deep inhale through the nose. And hold the breath. Begin to relax the muscles from the face, relaxing the shoulders, the navel, the diaphragm, and exhaling fully. Just keep the eyes closed just for a little bit, just breathing into you, and also finding an intention for this transmission, especially for those of you that are listening or watching the video. Soy retapeka sarenina namakai ke sarenia ke saki. Knowing that everything about you is loved and welcome. Soy retapaka sarenina namakai ke sinamaka. Everything of you is celebrated. Sai ko saratike namakai ke sarenina namakai ke si. And that we are mirrors of each other. Soy retapaka sarenina namakai ke sinanaka. Holding hands as we continue to remember. Soy retapaka sarenina namakai ke si. The wisdoms of our being. Soy retapaka sarenina namakai ke si. And the power that we hold. Soy retapaka sarenina namakai ke si. Let's take another deep inhale through the nose. Hold the breath and just feel the amazing energy that is already coming through. Your energy, our energy, life, and exhaling fully. And whenever you're ready, you can blink up the eyes. Yay. I love doing that. It feels like, ooh, now we're here. Hello, we have arrived.
Yeah, it's a nice warm hug.
Yeah. So I really would like to share how we reconnected.
Yeah,
So the
let's do
two
it.
of us, yeah. So the two of us were the yoga festival here, the Free Yoga State Festival. And Lindsay was playing the balls during the closing ceremony. And I held space during the cacao ceremony, so I was still kind of grounding and feeling all the feels. And then I see this amazing woman just setting up her bowls. And I honestly, immediately, as I sat down with my Brazilian sister, I was like, I know you. And I couldn't even place, where from. And I was like, I've seen you before. I don't know. I just feel like I know you. And I really wanted to go to you right away, be like, sister. But I was like, all right, let me just, chill and do whatever it is. But even, I don't know if I told you this, but even when you were playing, I felt that we were connecting super deeply. So that's why I approached you after the whole deal was done. And I really was like, sister, because this is one of the moments that I've had. It doesn't really happen that frequently, honestly. It happens with just a few sisters, and I'm just like, I know you. I know we've had many other lifetimes before. So I'm so excited, and I'm so grateful, honestly, that you were playing there. And then, obviously that I, in a way, build up the courage, but I wouldn't even say courage. I'm so used to doing that anyways. But back in the day, I would have been like, I built up the courage to get to you and be like, hi, sister.
Wow, oh my gosh. That's really flattering. I didn't know all of that because for me, it was honestly that day, me being there was just a bunch of mishaps, just happenings that led me there. The person that was supposed to be there couldn't make it. I think you knew her.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't make the drive, and the other person that they'd asked to do it didn't want to do the opening and the closing, and so they asked another person who couldn't do it, and then they came to me. And so I was just happy to be there. And I saw you at the opening and thought, wow, what a powerful being. What a cool person. I felt so excited just to be in a community full of like-minded people all on their own healing journey, but then also healing others and yoga. And it was just like all of my favorite kind of people in one spot. And so for me, it was just an honor to be there. And by the end of the day, I don't know if you remember, it was so hot that day. And we instructors arrived at 7:30 and the
Yep.
closing in the morning, and the closing ceremony was around 6:30 at night. So we'd been doing yoga all day. We'd been sweating all day. And I know I smelled, I know I was hot. I was tired. But I was so excited to play because as soon as I started playing, that's when I felt spirit come in and that warm hug come over me. And I just did my thing. And I love that when you are in your element, that is when attraction happens. Because that's what happened. That's what you're describing. You're describing my energy attracted you. But it was because I was in my element and I was letting my true authentic self be there. Like my smelly,
Mm.
sweaty self. I put on my earrings that I'd gotten in Colorado, that I didn't know why I'd gotten them, but they attracted you. Which, us meeting, as you know, started a big thing for me. And so I'm sure we'll get there in a minute, but it's really nice to hear that from somebody else and to hear
Mhm.
how my energy impacts somebody when I was also attracted to you from the moment I saw you at the opening ceremony.
Ah, yay. It's just
Yeah.
like we were so meant to like reconnect. So I love that.
Yeah.
And I love also what you're doing in your community. I had the honor to hold space in Linzi's community in Tonganoxie, Kansas for the last new moon, which was last week. And
Yeah.
amazing women. Wow, powerful women. So I'm honored that through that reconnection that, we got together to collaborate. And not just that, I really feel that this is the beginning of like a really deep connection and a really deep like the power of sisterhood. So thank you for
Yeah.
being open to that.
Yes. Thank you. I feel
Yeah.
just as honored. Yeah.
Mm. So I actually, we were talking so much and well, we've been talking actually since we reconnected, right? And your story was very empowering for me when you just opened up to me that day that we went to get some tea. And I would love to hear that a little bit if you would like to share with us, of course, your story and how you came to open up peace, love, and yoga in Tonganoxie and what happened, what happened for Linzi back then to have this light bulb moment and be like, hey, peace, love, yoga in Tonganoxie happens.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, the story really begins when we're born, right? And everything that happens to us through our
Mm,
lifetime. But I won't go that far back. I'll go back 6 years when my husband and I, we have three daughters. We live in Tonganoxie. We've been here our whole marriage. I'm originally from Southern Missouri, grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Um, but our paths led here. This is where my husband's from. And I was working corporate America. I was in a Fortune 500 company. I was a project manager for many years and I loved it. I was actually really good at it. And I got a lot of joy out of that job. And I got a lot in my identity from working in corporate America. It fed my ego. It gave
mm,
us financial security. I worked with a male dominated workforce and, was a female leader. And that felt really great. And I got to do a lot of amazing things that helped people. In office space, just talking to coworkers, as well as implementing things and doing things within the company that made real change. And that always felt good. And I really had a big piece of my identity tied up in that persona that I had built of myself, the hard worker, the one that achieves. I was very attached to the societal stigma of a working mom and being successful and what that means. So I was doing all the things. I was being super mom, I was being super wife, I was being super um, corporate person and balancing it all. I had it all. And guess what? I had anxiety, I had depression, I was struggling a lot with maintaining my energy outwardly. I looked good, I had it together. Inwardly, I felt like a hot mess.
mhm.
Um, but I just thought that something was missing, right? And of course, get pregnant, have another baby. Gosh, even saying this now, I'm like, what was I thinking? But I mean, at the time, like things were going well. I just was struggling with anxiety and depression, which at the time I thought was just a chemical imbalance in my brain. And so I took medication and it kept me pretty stable. I was in
Mhm.
therapy and supporting my emotional well being and thought that I was doing what I needed to do. And yoga was a big part of my practice then, but it
Mhm.
hadn't quite reached the spiritual level yet. It was just a safe space to move and breathe and to calm my mind. So we decided to have another baby. We felt our family wasn't complete, and that was a big decision. And when Bailey was born, as I was growing her in my tummy, my whole world started to shift and change. My parents went through a really awful divorce. It was very messy, it was very hard.
Mhm.
And divorce for children must be horrible. Divorce for adult children with children is horrible, especially in the circumstances that my parents had gone through.
Mhm.
My father had an affair. My mom found out it was with a significant person.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of pain, and they didn't handle it well. Like if there
Mhm.
was a book that could be written on how not to get divorced, I'm pretty sure my parents could write it, because I felt like they made all of the wrong decisions. And I'm not saying that from judgment. I'm saying it from the pain and suffering my sister and I went through
Sure.
during this divorce.
Mhm.
Um, and because we were adults, I think we were leaned on in ways that were inappropriate by our parents because they needed support in both of their reasons, in both of their
Mhm.
stories. And it was really hard to hold that space for them.
Yeah.
Um, so I did that while pregnant, and my pregnancy was really rough with Bailey. I was very sick. I was working, remember that big gig that I loved and I'm good at. It's really hard to do when you're not doing well. With
Mhm.
everything that was going on in my personal life, with trying to grow a new person inside of me, which I disconnected from, by the way, I was not present for that pregnancy. I was too worried about the material world, about my parents' divorce, about my job, that I just kept thinking, man, I can't wait for this pregnancy to be over so my life can get back to normal. Right.
Mhm.
So by the time she was born, I was already in a rough space mentally. I was experiencing grief from my parents' divorce. My grandmother passed away. My childhood home was being sold. The farm I grew up on was being sold because my parents, neither one was keeping it. They wanted to split the asset, which makes sense. My
Mhm.
grandpa needed to sell his home. Makes sense. He no longer, had a wife he was supporting in that house. But it was a lot of loss all at once. And then this new life came in, and I thought, oh my gosh, I made it. We've given birth, we made it. Um, and she was born. And I remember right away seeing little movements in the hospital, going, hmm, what's that? And the nurses looked at me and they said, oh, those are just normal baby movements. And I took that. I'm like, okay, cool. We get home and postpartum depression kicked in like I've never experienced. My 2 year old, my middle child at the time, she was this angel baby. It's her fault we had a third kid because she was just always so sweet and loving and perfect and slept through the night. And like she made me go, oh, maybe they all won't be like our first one was, who was a harder infant. Paisley was just so easy and fun loving that we were like, yeah, we can do this again. But that shifted when we brought when we brought Bailey home because Paige was just two, and she started having behaviors. And I remember at one point we had come home. I just needed rest, so tired. Um, Baby was crying, Paisley was crying, Nevaeh, she was only 5, was really upset. And I remember locking myself in the bathroom, crying hysterically like someone had died, and just
Mhm.
going, what the F did I do to my life? Why
Mhm.
did I tip the scale? Why did I have this other baby? And it was a really horrible feeling. Um, and you think it's postpartum depression. I went through my weeks of maternity leave. I bonded with Baby. Things started to calm down, but those movements that I noticed, they didn't stop. If anything, they were getting worse. And so we took her to the doctor when she was about 6 weeks old, and they told us acid reflux. And
Mhm.
so we started treating her for acid reflux. There was a few different treatment options they had to go through, and we tried those, and they weren't working. And I remember I had just gotten my first day back at work, and Bailey had had these movements again the Sunday before. And so my husband took her to the doctor because it was my first day back at work. And I remember being in the lactation room pumping while on a conference call with my husband and the doctor and Bailey. And mind you, this is my third child at this point. And we've been with our same pediatrician the whole time. I'm not one of those moms that take my kids to the doctor for every little thing. I take my kids for their checkups and when they're sick. And so my doctor knows my behavior at this point. And so he said, I really think this is acid reflux. This is the next treatment option we have. He said, Lindsay, do you think this is acid reflux? Do you think that's what is going on? And I said, no, I don't. I do not think this is acid reflux. And so at the time, he was like, well, let's just go ahead and order an EEG. I believe she was having seizures. That's what I had researched. That's what I was feeling in my soul, was that she was having seizures. And so they scheduled what is called an EEG, which just scans the brain waves. And we went and did that. And 4 days later, we got a phone call that, oh, this is so hard to talk about. We got a phone call that Bailey's EEG came back abnormal. And I was home alone. I was home alone, and my doctor called me, the same pediatrician, and he said, Lindsay, are you home? And I said, yes, I'm home working. And so I already knew something was wrong because he called me and he said, where is the baby? And I said, the baby's at daycare. I was working. And he said, you need to go get her and you need to drive her to Children's Mercy immediately. There's already a team of doctors waiting for you. Bailey is in critical condition and she needs to get to the hospital right away. So I called my husband. I told him what was going on. It was my daughter, my oldest daughter's first day of school. It was her first day of kindergarten. And I wasn't home when she got off the bus for the first time. I was in the hospital with her baby sister. And when we got there, they hooked Bailey up to every machine and every wire. So many doctors in and out, taking us to do MRIs and echocardiograms and administrated this drug and that drug, and they're not telling us anything. We were there for 3 days watching our newborn baby treated like a specimen with no answers. And then they came in. And at this point, like, I already thought, well, maybe it's epilepsy. And, you know, Miss Positive, like, it's going to be okay. Don't want to feel the pain. You know, it's going to be okay. We're going to love her no matter what. Epilepsy is completely treatable. She'll have a normal life. And then the neurologist set us down. Oh, this is so hard. And she looked at me and she held my hand. And she said, Lindsay, your daughter has a condition called tuberous sclerosis complex. And of course I went, what the hell is that? And she said it was a very rare genetic condition that causes tumor growth in the primary organs of the body. Most of the time they're non-cancer, but they can turn into cancer. And for every patient that is impacted by tuberous sclerosis complex, it manifests completely differently. We know that 50% of the patients are autistic and severely impacted. And most of the patients, commonality is that they have tumors in the brain that cause seizures. And she explained to me Bailey's manifestation, and it was primarily in her brain. Her heart was good, her lungs were good, her eyes were good. So those were positives. But she did have several in her brain, and that's what was causing her to have seizures. There is no cure. There's only symptom management, and that she would require testing and procedures for the rest of her life to monitor her condition. And the only thing we could do was to treat symptoms. So we knew that at the time, you know, there are TSC patients that don't realize they have, it's what we call it for short, TSC, because tuberous sclerosis complex is a mouthful. We knew that there's a wide range and a spectrum, that she could live a completely normal life. Like sometimes parents don't realize that they have the disorder until they have a child and they give them that disorder, because there's a 50-50 chance of sending that if you have the gene. But with Bailey, that wasn't the case. We had to go through testing, and hers was spontaneous. Um, Nothing I did caused it. They don't even know the cause. It's just what happened. And learning to live with that grief, the not knowing what her manifestation would be, was really challenging, and not being able to do anything. And I remember looking at my husband when we were getting all of this information, and I watched him disappear. I watched his spirit leave his body, and he disappeared for a long time. The grief involved, it just took him over. The I cannot describe to you the sensation. And for any listeners that have a child with special needs, my heart goes to you, because there is no worse feeling than something being wrong with your baby and you can't help them. And so that's when my life started to change tremendously. She
I want
became
to
my
take a
everything.
moment to honor you, sister, and to just like take a time to, feel the feels, because I'm feeling a lot. Feeling, and I'm
Yeah,
sure like the listeners too, but I want to
yeah.
honor you for your strength and your courage of sharing your life here with us, and for being so vulnerable and so raw, and for letting us see you. But not just that, but
Thank
for
you.
really showing us you, right? Like this emotions, because it could have been super easy for you to like in a way skip that part, put it like parenthesis, I'm just going to start here, or just not really go into detail. But you going into detail or sharing all these things to see you as the human being that you are, and also as a powerful woman and mother that you are, like going through all
Thank
this
you.
transition. Yeah.
I sat with that and thought about glazing over it, but it's just such an instrumental piece in a
Mm,
spiritual journey, because we have to be at our lowest point to surrender.
for sure.
And for me, I was in control of my life before Bailey, or at
Mm,
least I thought I was. I was trying to control everything: my finances, my work life balance, my time with my kids, the daycare they went to, the food that we consumed, the money we spent. I mean, everything was within my control, which I later learned was a trauma response, and we'll get there. Um,
mhm.
but I felt safe and I felt in control. And so I got a lot of safety from that. But when Bailey came, I had no control,
Mm,
and I broke into a million pieces. My family life wasn't stable anymore. My family life dynamic wasn't there anymore. I had this child with this scary, unknown disease, disorder, whatever you want to call it, genetic condition. I had no idea what she was going to have to go through, or what her life would look like, or what mine was going to look like anymore. All I knew was that I was there to figure it out. If I can manage a lab build out in Brazil for a Fortune 500 company in my 20s with nothing but a bunch of men, then I sure as shit could manage Bailey's case.
mm,
And I felt a lot of power in my abilities, I guess. And so I started throwing everything into that, into learning everything I could about the disorder, into advocating for the disorder, into participating in medical research, and
mm,
all while really leaning in my yoga practice. And I think that's really important here. Like, I'm telling two
mhm,
stories that eventually collide. And so I was really leaning into my yoga practice while also really leaning into this new world of tuberous sclerosis complex. And I felt a lot of grief release through empowering other families and getting involved. For a while, I advocated with the Tuberous Sclerosis Alliance and went to Jeff City to advocate for medical research funding for tuberous sclerosis complex. And at the time, there was a governor who had a son with a disorder in Missouri. And we were trying to get funding back. We had $250,000 a year allocated from the Missouri state to fund medical research funding that a lot of our kids now are benefiting from. And so we were losing that funding,
oh,
and we need to advocate for it to come back so that we can continue. And so a
mhm,
bunch of us families went and talked to many senators, to just express tuberous sclerosis, what our families go through, tell our stories, and then also share some data about how many families are impacted by this disorder, and what it could mean. And I was invited back. And so I went with a big group at first. And then they liked our story enough that they invited me back to address the Missouri State Senate. So not just going into senator's office, but to be able to speak to the entire state Senate with Bailey.
That's
So my husband and I
amazing.
went back. Yeah, it is. It was a really cool opportunity. So we went back and we did that. And I don't know what magic works, but we ended up winning that funding, which approved the use of CBD oil for the
Mhm.
use of tuberous sclerosis patients in epilepsy. And we saw huge improvements from that drug, and it made a big difference for Bailey. And it was exciting to get to have a piece of that and to be part of that. And it made me feel good to advocate. So
I
yoga
just want to
practice is
say
growing.
one more time,
Yeah.
wow, wow. I mean, because I didn't know this part of your story, that of like your family story, and that's
Yeah.
the work that you're doing. It goes just deeper than the actual community of Tonganoxie, right? It's honestly, yes, Missouri, but in the scheme of things, it's like the family dynamics of anybody that has something similar to your daughter, or even not just that, but somebody that is going through somewhat similar things that your family went through, maybe are still going through because of having, a daughter with special needs, right? And it's
Yeah.
so empowering, to hear this. And I'm sure for the listeners, it's like, ooh, like you're sharing all these things, and my heart is like, oh my gosh,
Oh,
can I just hold you right now as you're sharing
yeah.
all those
Well, and the
things?
thing is like I'm feeling like, okay, well, I need to talk. There's a big story here, but these pieces are all very important.
Yeah.
So we threw ourselves into advocating. We got more involved with the community. And it helped and it hindered. Because here's the thing: when you're a parent of a child with special needs, people are like, oh, maybe you should join a support group. Yes, do that. If that feels good to you and you feel supported in that support group, amazing. I'm so glad that you found something that helps you. It did not help me. And
Mm,
let's be real here for just a second. When you are in a support group with other people that are going through something, especially like tuberous sclerosis complex or autism, things that have this label, but everyone's story is different. We have this saying in the autism world, which we'll get Bailey to get diagnosed with autism later. But we have this saying that if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism, because it's a spectrum. Everyone's impacted differently, and everyone finds different things that work for them. And what I found when I was really involved in the support community of Bailey's condition, it actually made me feel less than. It actually triggered things in me that didn't feel great, because everyone has the doctor that they like and they think you should see that doctor, or they have this
mm,
medication that works for them and they think you should try that medication. And so it constantly has you, yes, supported, because no one really understands the work it is to have a child that's in and out of the medical system, in and out of the hospital, which we were at the time. I mean, Bailey continued to have seizures from the time she was born until she was six years old, almost 6 years old, 5 years old. Yeah, 5 years old. And drug after drug, hospitalization after hospitalization. Our family was ripped apart in every way. We couldn't get any help from the state or anyone that actually needed it, because we made too much money, or she was too young, or the autism waiver was, too long of a waiting list. And so for years, it was just Gene and I. And we were grinding hard to pay for these hospital bills. We were grinding hard to advocate for the disorder. We were grinding hard to keep life normal for our other girls. He would stay
mm.
home and I would be in the hospitals. Bailey didn't sleep for 5 years
Wow.
between the seizures and the medications. And so I would be up all night and working all day, and would do yoga in the morning or at nighttime to try to find some time for myself. And I've always been a big believer in component and food and essential oils. And so I leaned really heavily and finding nutrition for my body and using essential oils, all while doing like all of these things for Bay too. And we saw a lot of difference, but we couldn't get the flippin' autism diagnosis until she was 2. And you can't get certain therapies unless you have an autism diagnosis. And the therapies are only most effective before the age of 3, because development is pretty firm by the age of 3 and behaviors
Right.
are pretty well set. So, how messed up is that? That you cannot get a diagnosis until the age of 2. And once you get a diagnosis, that's when you can start applying for therapies. And then guess what? There are wait lists. And so you really can't even get flippant treatment until they're 3. And at that point, their behaviors are set. And so I'm sitting back going, this is messed up. There's got to be a better way. And so when she was
Mhm.
18 months old, we advocated to have her diagnosed. And she was, but that took time. And so then we came into this treatment and this study for tuberous sclerosis, where we would have to fly out to California once a month, but we were able to be followed by the neurology clinic at UCLA that was doing a study for tuberous sclerosis complex and the benefits of, what do they call it? Early intervention. Early intervention for therapy before you can get an autism diagnosis. And so I'm like, we're in, we need this. Like, she needs as much help as she can get. And so that's another sacrifice we made. Like, I started traveling to LA once a month with my daughter, leaving my other kids behind to do this therapy. And we did a remote stuff. And it was really great. Honestly, I learned a lot about autism. I learned a lot about behavior analysis. And I was able to work with Bailey and do all of this. Mind you, I am working from home full time with her full time. My office, like, I was like, either I have to quit or you guys need to let me work from home. They didn't want me to quit. And so they let me work from home. And this was pre COVID. So that was unheard of. I'm working from home full time. I'm doing all of this with her. I'm managing my other 2 kids. I'm trying to maintain a relationship and a marriage with a husband that's still really grieving and really having a hard time
Mm.
himself. And who's taking care of me? Right. All of these plates are spinning, 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 spinning. And guess what? I disassociated from myself. Things kind of started clicking all at once. And so we went through this 3-year period of a lot of suffering and drugs and hospitals with no support. And when seizures, but we were living with them. They were under control. On a bad day, she'd have 10. On a good day, she'd have 2 or 3. But we had learned to live with it. We just learned to accept that this is who Bailey is. I wouldn't say that we'd given up hope on seizure freedom, but we had definitely learned to live with where we're at, making the best out of it. And so we got into a good groove. And then COVID hit.
Oh my gosh.
um, so all of a sudden, I'm working from home full time with 3 kids at home, with this
Wow.
scary thing. The world felt like it was ending. Everyone was getting sick. I was already, remember all those plates I had spinning. None of those stopped, but now I was expected to be teacher too, and I lost it.
Mm.
I I I was this person on the outside. Inside, I was empty. I always describe it as a chocolate Easter bunny, but the ones that don't have any filling. You know, like when you take a
Mhm.
bite of those chocolate
Mhm.
bunnies and they just kind of crumble because you think there's peanut butter or caramel or in the center and there's not. That's what I felt like.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like on the outside I looked like me, but I felt like a shell. I felt like a previous version. I didn't know who I was anymore. I couldn't tell you what made me happy. I couldn't tell you what my hobbies were. And I'm in therapy. And one day my therapist looks at me and she goes, Lindsay, what's something you do for you? And I was like, oh, well, therapist, I I love a clean house. It makes me feel so calm inside. And I love it when I have all the laundry done. And like, I started describing all these action-based things that were not for me, they're for my family. She's like,
Mm.
those aren't for you. What do you like to do? What brings you joy? And I'm like, oh, well, I really love to take baths. I love essential oils. I love massages and that whole vibe. And I love yoga. And she's like, oh, okay, great. Do more of that. And I'm like, ha
Mm.
ha. With what time? She's like, Lindsay, do more of that. I'm like, okay. So I started doing more of that. And I already had a really consistent practice. I've been practicing yoga since 2007. And it was always a great place for me. It kept my body looking good. It kept me feeling strong. It kept me feeling mentally clear. It helped with stress relief. It was all these beautiful things. And I'd always been like, maybe I could be a yoga teacher one day, but it was always in person. And as a mom and a full-time employee, that didn't seem feasible because usually you'd have to leave for about 30 days at the time. It was like a go away kind of thing. And obviously, with the position I was in, that didn't seem responsible and it didn't feel achievable. Whether those 2 things were true or not, that's what I believed. But
Can
COVID,
we honor all the mothers right now? I'm feeling like this, like my heart is so tender, like honoring, because obviously your situation, like your story, right, with your daughter and everything that like you and your husband went through, and also your other girls, right? It's like it's very deep, right? And and of course super challenging. And there's how many mothers out there are like have been in the same situation or are in the same situation or
Yeah.
similar situation, and even the mothers that are not in the same situation that really do everything for their family and put themselves last, right, to like get into that point, like your therapist, goodness, I'm so grateful for her that she's like, okay, do
Yeah.
more of that because it's time
Yeah.
for you to take care of you. Like if you don't take care of you and something happens to you, what's going to happen to your little girl, right? And your other daughters, and obviously
Right.
yourself. Yeah, you wouldn't have the energy to continue to give, which you were doing. Yeah.
Which I was doing. I was
Mhm.
giving, and nothing was filling my cup up. And I just, for a moment, that is society. That's how I
Mm,
was raised and programmed to be selfless, to be graceful, to look beautiful on the outside. The inside didn't matter as much. Like you swallow down your tears, you put on a smiling face, you pull your big girl britches on, and you do what you got to do. Also comes
mhm.
with being a farm girl. Like it comes from your work to have your living. You work for what you have. Hard work fixes everything.
Mm,
Um, and for me, I didn't know any better. I
yeah.
didn't know any different. All of the women in my life growing up did it all. They worked, just took care of the house. How are they doing emotionally? Unfortunately, I'm never going to know. I mean,
Mm,
I talk to my mom about it now, and I see her through a completely different lens. Growing up with her wasn't easy. Our relationship wasn't great, but I have so much respect for her now.
yeah.
I feel so sorry for her experience. And I wish I could have a conversation with my grandma, and just
Mm,
talk to her about what her experience was, because I admired her so much. I still do. Um, hmm, but I can't even imagine what her experience was and how much of herself she swallowed along the way.
I feel you, sister.
And
Same thing with
yeah,
my grandma, even my mom. And I honestly, I till this day, I am still working through the patterns of what I saw growing up, right? Because
yeah,
I noticed that in my relationship, maybe a couple or like 3 years ago or something, I realized I was putting his needs before mine. And then whenever I will be upset about something, wouldn't even tell him. I will just swallow it. And then until I was like, oh my gosh, wait a second, this is what my mom has been doing, from my experience, my witnessing of her, right?
exactly.
Like, and then my
Yes.
grandma, and then probably my great grandma. And so, like, speaking those things up, not only for super uncomfortable, but very scary and very raw and super vulnerable, that at times I had to like cover my face and be like, this is what I'm feeling. And of course, like,
Yeah.
like Derek comes from like, the other also a very similar part of the spectrum, right? And so it's just like, okay, so maneuvering that and figuring out in a way a new way of being, a new relationship, and breaking the codes from our family lineage hasn't been very easy. And of course, we're still working through that. It's not very easy for anybody. And goodness, and again, being in the situation that you were right there, and it's like, wow, yeah. So how did that shift in your life when you started to do more yoga or maybe take a bath and do your essential oils? How did that
Yeah.
feel?
So I think the first step was realizing my complete lack of self-love.
Mm,
And when I realized
oof,
that, my super critical nature, like again, always struggled with food, critical of my body, critical of the work I would produce. And I put so much worth into producing, achieving.
mm,
There was nothing I couldn't do. Clearly, I mean, already at this point, we're talking a 29-year-old had done all of those things. A 29-year-old. I was still such a baby. I got with my husband when I was 19, such a baby. Um, but I had no idea.
mhm,
And so I started leaning into my yoga practice more. I started getting
mm,
more massages. I started really getting heavy into a company called Young Living and their essential oils.
mhm,
Um, I got off all of my medication, and just started using oils. And meditating more and doing yoga. And, at this point, COVID's been going on for a little while and getting into the groove of the kids being home and um, starting to enjoy that, starting to enjoy the beauty of slowing down because COVID did
Mm.
some really hard things to families.
Hmm.
It did something magical to ours too, though. It reminded us of how busy we were, how
Yeah.
much we were going, how much we were doing, and how much we weren't just being together. And so we started just being together.
Mm.
And that was really beautiful. And so I randomly one day was like, I want to learn more about yoga. I wonder if there's any online schools now that COVID's going on, right? And I looked and it was like spirit just led me to just the right one. It was the right price point for me, which was important at that moment. Again, lots of
Right.
medical bills.
Yeah.
And finances were tough. So that mattered, but it was the right school for me. It wasn't
Mm.
even just the right price point, which was important, but it was the right place. And something shifted for me during that. I really just wanted to learn more about yoga. I wanted to deepen my own practice. And as I was completing school, I was taking a really indulgent bath. Just feeling really grateful and excited and open. And at this point, like the concept of being a yoga teacher or doing that as a career was not something that was on the plate, right? Wasn't in my plans. um but as I'm laying there, which mind you, during this, I also got very into my Christianity and started leaning more into my faith. And that helped me let go with Bailey's condition a lot and learn to
Mm.
live in the storm and learn to live in the wave that is her disease and learn to find the beauty in who she is.
Mm.
Because if we were constantly trying to fix her, then we wouldn't get to enjoy who she is. And
Yeah.
guys, she's an angel. I still to this day believe that Bailey is a fallen angel or is an angel that we've been gifted to take care of because if you ever meet her,
Mm.
she is pure love and there's nothing unadulterated about her. And so while this was really hard, it was also very beautiful and it had a way of stripping us from things that weren't really important in our life.
I am so
And so
excited to
yoga
meet
school came at
her.
the right moment. We were
Yeah.
getting our feet back underneath us. Gina and I were reconnecting. He was coming back to me. He
Mm.
was coming back into his body. Bailey was not doing perfectly. She was still having seizures, but she was doing well for her. Pays and Neveo, they were doing well for them. And yoga school was very helpful. And as I completed my 200 hour and I was sitting in that bath with all the essential oils and feeling the joy in my heart that I hadn't felt in so long, I felt a message come through and my entire body started to tingle head to toe. And I started to like cramp up. I thought I was dehydrated. I got out of the tub and started crying once I caught my breath and went to my husband. I was like, I think I'm dehydrated. I got all like cramped up and I can't move my toes. I was having a Kundalini awakening because I was in
Mhm.
really deep meditation. I was focusing on my chakras. I was focusing on my breathing. I was in a salt bath with crystals and I had Himalayan salt lamps everywhere. Like I had a whole vibe going, right? It was like a ceremony before I knew what a ceremony was. It was just very intuitively led, but it just felt good to me, right? And the water felt so comforting. And what I know now is I was
Mm.
just really nourishing my sacral chakra and allowing myself to be held in the womb of mother and in water and in earth, connecting to all the elements. Like I know that now, but I didn't know that then.
Mhm.
And I'm cramping up, right? Like my toes are cramped, my fingers are cramped up. I had this message come through and it was like, you need to start a business called Peace, Love, and Yoga. And I'm cramping up. I freak out. I'm like, honey. And I get out of the tub and he gets me some water and we just think I got overheated and it's this moment. Later I realized what that was when it happened again. But I
How
didn't hesitate. I went,
beautiful it
okay.
is
So
that,
I have a business
you,
degree.
yeah, so how beautiful it is that you made the space for this message, by slowing down, by doing your yoga teacher training, by taking time for yourself, and also by, all this awareness that was coming in, right, to actually like experience your daughter as she is and all the other girls and your husband coming back. It's like seemed like as a family system, you guys were coming back to yourselves and also coming back to the family system, right? So creating more space for who you truly are, And then here you are taking care of yourself, as you made already so much space to receive such a empowering message that will just be something so beautiful that you
Oh,
create in the community.
yeah, I think of it as my period of letting go, of
Mhm.
of letting go of control, which I think is always going to be my old friend. Control is something that I'm going to have to look at from different angles, probably the rest of my life.
Mhm.
Maybe not. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't manifest that, but it has been my old friend that comes up a lot for me. And I think that was our period of just acceptance, of
Yeah.
releasing control, because Bailey was our big, like, you don't have control over anything moment. You just got to do the best you can with what's in front of you. And for me,
Mhm.
I really started to embody that, and I let go, and it just created space. And then yoga teacher training was intended to help me fuel a passion that was for me. And I had intended on just keeping it for me. But then I got that message, that download, that moment. And I said, okay. Being a business major, it didn't seem like a hard thing to form a business, or anything unachievable. I didn't have to do much with it, right? So I went ahead and did it. I formed my LLC, and I decided that, okay, cool. I'm just going to start doing some yoga online for free, just for fun. I started a Facebook group. I wasn't really even on social media much other than posting stuff about Bailey. I didn't have an Instagram. I just had a Facebook. And so I created a Facebook group, private group called Peace, Love, and Yoga with Linzi, and started doing some free online stuff. And when I started doing that, I had a few people reach out to me locally. They're like, hey, it's still COVID. No one could really go to classes at the time. Everything was really online. And she had asked, she said, hey, I'd love to get a group of friends together at my house and do yoga. Is that something you're open to? Because at this point, we aren't seeing anybody. We're still very isolated. And I'm like, yeah, as long as, they feel safe and comfortable with that, I'm all for
Mhm.
us getting together and doing yoga. And so she would bring yummy snacks and put on this whole
Oh.
spread, and we would do yoga and meditation. And I did that for a while. And then people started reaching out to me to do retreats. And so I started traveling a little bit. And with that, I was like, oh, hey, maybe I need to find a location. Maybe I do need to teach someplace, because there is no yoga in Tongi, right? Like Tonganoxie is what we call our little town, is Tongi. There's no place to do yoga here, or wasn't. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to find like a massage therapist to partner with one day and start a wellness center? And I shit you not, I don't know if I can cuss on this, sorry, but
I
it
totally
was,
could.
I was looking for business insurance. Okay, cool. So I shit you not, I was just calling a local resource about some business insurance, told him what I was dabbling in, and he was like, huh, well, someone just purchased the old Myers Hotel here in town, and they are looking for a yoga person. And guess what? She was a massage therapist. And the building that he was describing, I had seen it had just recently gone for sale, and I had even contemplated looking into buying it. But I'm like, no, I've got a Bailey. This is not the time. I had the resources, but I did not have the time. So I guess I didn't have the resources. I had the financial means, I did not have the time. That's the building she bought.
Mm.
She purchased the building, and she was looking for a yoga person. And so I stepped in and I started teaching classes a couple of nights a week there, really slow moving. Tongi's a really conservative town. Yoga is not, people are uneducated. And so we are re-educating people. So anyways,
Mm.
I'm like working, I'm doing the kid thing. Life's pretty good. I'm teaching yoga classes. Um, I had just intended on it being mine. Like I did not intend on having other instructors. So a year into it, doing it all. See, I'm still doing it all. I still haven't quite got the hint that I'm overperforming, working
Mm.
full time, raising my three daughters, nourishing my marriage, working on myself. At this point, I've got a great self care practice. So I'm feeling good, but still doing it all. And well, we were told that Bailey, because we had so many hospitalizations, I bet we were hospitalized 13 times in 3 years, or in the 4 years up to that point. We'd failed, let's just say 10 medications, all very dangerous medications. At one point, I was giving Bailey injections every day. I'm not a nurse. but I had to give her shots every day. I can't even tell you the hell we went through with seizure medications and the side effects and the effects on her body. She's a baby, and that was her entire life at that point, pumping that child with drugs, which again, I'm not for. I don't want to take
Mm-hmm.
drugs. Big pharma is something I'm not supportive of. Um, I would much rather have a naturalistic, holistic outlook on things. But Bailey has taught me that there is power in both.
Yeah.
And so it reframed me. And so I no longer feel that way. I believe that if you need medication and it works for you, do not feel ashamed to take that medication. You need what you
Totally.
need, sister. You support yourself. And don't feel
Totally.
shame for that. And I believe
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Mm-hmm.
same thing for Bailey. So I started putting her medications on my altar so that I could
Oh,
honor them in the same way that I honored my essential oils and crystals. And so I
wow.
shifted my mindset with that. But then our doctor called us and we were out of meds to try. And Bailey's seizure types were very dangerous and life threatening. Um, so we had to decide if we were going to do brain surgery. And hearing that was really hard. But we knew it was our only option. We didn't know what the outcome would be. It could not work. It could cause physical harm, mental harm to her. But the only way to know was to go through the process. And the process to brain surgery is messy. It's hard. And there's a lot of testing beforehand. And going through that, you don't know that you're going to get the yes for surgery. So there were a lot of unknowns, but my spiritual practice was stronger. My husband was feeling better, and we said yes. And we went through that 6 months of hell, of testing, of tests. And it was a yes. We were eligible for surgery. They had to present her case in front of a full panel of doctors. And it was a yes, but it was going to be 2 surgeries, not just one. And again, we wouldn't know until the 7th day if they were able to do the surgery to remove the tumor that they thought was causing seizures. Because what happens when brains start having seizures is the whole brain starts to light up. And so it's not always easy to tell where in the brain a seizure can start. It's like a spark to a flame, and then the whole thing catches on fire. It's hard to pinpoint where the spark started. So that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to figure out the spark. And the only way to do that was to surgically implant wires into her brain to touch the 2 tumors that they thought it could be. And if even one seizure came from this area of her brain, her right side of her brain, and not just the left, then we would not have been eligible for surgery. They needed it to be in one centralized location for it to be safe. And so we went through 7 days of hell. What I call it, it was the worst week of my life. They took her off all of them so that they could see if they could. And so surgery 1, all meds gone. The next day, oh my gosh, I I thought medications weren't working for her. Whew, I was wrong. They were working. The kind of seizures that kid had, oh my gosh. To watch my baby go through that, for want her to have seizures, but she's vomiting and convulsing and in pain, and it's just seizure after seizure every 15 minutes that kid would seize. And they got all the data they needed. We knew nothing. They told us nothing for that entire time. And then they came into the room. Again, it was just like when she was diagnosed. They all came into the room and they said that all of her seizures had come from the left side of her brain, that they are able to do surgery, but there's no guarantee that this one wouldn't flare up. And so one doctor was telling me it's not worth the risk of surgery. Another doctor telling me it's a slam dunk. Choice was ours. And so I looked at Jean, and I had felt from the moment the doctor called us about the brain surgery, while it would be hard, it would be worth it. In the pit of my stomach, in the core of my being, I knew it was all going to be okay. And so for me, I'm like, let's go for it. If for some reason we knew the risks, we knew what the risks were, and they did not outweigh the thought of seizure freedom. And they told us that she would continue to seize after surgery, for at least 2 weeks while the brain was healing. So we wouldn't know if the surgery, excuse me, was successful till a few weeks after. And so I remember I was in bed with her. They were rolling us down to the surgery room. She's seizing. She's sick. She's holding on to me. And I had experimented with energy healing before. Naturally, I've always felt that I had the gift. Mind you, I'm an empath. I have been my whole life. I channeled for the first time, I think, in that moment, healing into her, and I let go completely. And she went into surgery. And when she came out, well, the whole left side of her head, there was a C shape from her scalp all the way behind her ear, a giant C, hundreds of stitches. They completely shaved the side of her head, kind of like what your hair looks like when you had it shaved on the side. It looked like that.
Yeah.
She looked like this powerful, badass warrior. And she came out, and that kid, she wanted to eat, and no seizures. 24 hours later, no seizures. 2 days later, no seizures. 2 weeks later, no seizures. 1 year later, no seizures.
Oh my
And she
gosh.
has developed and grown leaps and bounds in that time frame. She started kindergarten 3 weeks after surgery. 3 weeks. She walked into kindergarten like nothing had happened. And
Oh.
I found a lot of inspiration in that from her. I decided to take Reiki training. I did Reiki training 1 month after her surgery. Something shifted for me big. Light came in, my shadow self was seen. I had this spiritual awakening, and that voice came back and said, "It's time to quit your job." And I'm like, "What? No, it's not. Like, this is how I pay for all of Bailey's everything. This is how we do this." Like, ego is like, nope, not gonna happen. And so I did this. I said, "Spirit, if I'm really supposed to quit my job, you have to solve Bailey's insurance problems for me." I carried insurance for my family. Medications don't just go away after you gain seizure freedom. You have to keep taking them and then slowly take them away after time. And so none of our medical expenses had changed. And by the way, I don't know if anyone has children in behavior therapy. That is very expensive, very expensive. Without insurance, you're talking $20,000 a month. For medications without insurance, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. Like, the thought of not having insurance when you have a child with needs, or if you are a person have needs, is terrifying. And so when I say, what about insurance? It was, what about insurance? Like, it was probably the most important thing to our family other than having food on the table. Because we had no help. The government wouldn't help us. We made too much money. And I had applied for every waiver I could for Bailey, but we'd been declined because we made too much money, or because there was a waiting list. And so she was on waiting list. So I said to Spirit, I negotiated, if you can even do that. I don't know why Spirit negotiated with me, but maybe they know me well enough to know that she needed to see it to believe it. And so I said, "Give me Bailey insurance. Help me figure out this insurance situation. I will quit my job." One day later, I shit you not, I get a phone call that Bailey was qualified to be on the autism waiver, which means that she was qualified for state-funded insurance. And that took the pressure off of me having to carry it, because anything that your insurance won't cover, Medicaid comes in and picks that up for you. And so for us, it didn't matter the quality of insurance anymore. It just mattered that she had a primary insurance. And my husband worked for a small company. Insurance wasn't great, but that's all we needed, because Medicaid would pick up the rest. And so I said, "Okay, you did it. Now it's time for me to do it." And so listen to this. So I do it. I work up the nerve. I had an aura class at the studio, which we're doing on November 10th for anyone that is interested. We're having an aura class where I had a professional come in, and she has a machine that you put your hand on, and it reads and scans your aura in real time. And you're able to see what your aura looks like in this moment, what chakras are where they're at in your body, how they're doing. Like, maybe if you have a really strong third eye, you can see that. It's where science and spirit meet. And so for a left brain person like me, who was having a hard time buying into this metaphysical world, it really helped me see what I'd already knew and felt. And during that moment, she was able to identify a childhood trauma that had already been kind of resurfacing for me. And it freaking plowed into me when she told me the age and what it could have been. All of these memories come flooding in. And I had this
This is
horrible
just
trauma that happened to me from the
from the
age.
aura reading.
Mhm.
Wow.
Well, I think it was, yes, from the aura reading, but it was like spirits. I always call him he, I don't know what he is, but I feel like spirit waits for that opening. Like you
Yeah.
left your window open and then the breeze can come in. And I think it was just an opening for me for spirit to go give me a download.
Mhm.
Um, and it's something I already knew but had forgotten and blocked out. And it had started to wake up during my attunement for Reiki. But I think I was still pushing it down. And when I could see these blocks in my aura field and what they were associated to, because chakras, gosh, I'm obsessed with them. I love learning about them. And so once I saw what they were tied to, I don't know, like I just immediately like had this download and knew
Ooh.
and remembered.
I want to say that you
And
are like the perfect, literally, like the perfect example of like surrendering to spirit and like seeing it come through, like a perfect manifestation of like, okay, well, this is what you want me to do. This is what, I'm meant to do. Then figure out the other thing so I can actually be in my journey. And, and the
right.
next day it happens and it's like, bam, here you go, quit your job and then do what you're meant to do.
Yeah. So insurance got figured out. The aura class happened. I'm realizing these past traumas. I go to my boss, and I tell her, I am giving you my notice. I want to give you a 3-month notice, so that they had time to replace me. She didn't want me to go, but she supported me in my journey. And that's what makes
Mm,
her such an amazing person. She was a
wow.
fantastic boss. And so it was very difficult to leave the support that I had found in my work family there because I wasn't leaving the job. I was jumping into something new and exciting, right? Like I wanted to
Mhm.
jump into my own business to see if I could do it. I was taking a risk on me,
Yeah.
but I wasn't leaving them. And so that was hard. It was hard to shut that door. Still is. Like I probably would still go back if the right thing, popped up and worked out. Um, but it was time for me to leave at that point.
Mm.
And she asked me if I was sure. I said yes. And she said, okay, this needs to be off the record. Don't put anything on writing. She said, there is a layoff coming through. And if you are sure, I want to get you on the list because quitting means I wouldn't get severance. And I'd been there
I
10 years, but getting laid
literally
off,
chills in my crown. My whole crown was
yeah.
just went in chills when you were sharing that.
Oh, yes, chills all over. Like and me too. And again, I'm going through a spiritual awakening. And so I'm really learning to lean in and to trust and to feel the sensations in my body. I really wanted to jump into Reiki practice. I was already doing Reiki on people. I was teaching classes. And I forgot a big piece of the story was during Bailey's surgery. I had stepped away from peace, love, and yoga. I was going to take the summer off to focus on her and the testing we were going through for surgery. And my last day teaching, a woman come in. Her name was Summer. She was a yoga instructor. She'd never come to my class before. And as I was reminding the student base that this was the last class for the summer, she came up to me afterwards and volunteered to continue to take my classes, to teach for me through the summer so that I could focus on Bailey.
Oh my
So
gosh.
spirit,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. So like for everybody listening, I think that we all go, especially us as healers, right? In order to reawaken and remember that really deep, powerful part of us, we gotta be shaken out to the core, which of course it happens and it happened big time to you, right? But then at
Yeah.
the same time, like remembering, see, this is the other side of the spectrum, right? So you stuck with that, right? It seems
Mhm.
like you were like for like 5 years, you were deep, deep in this like, what is this thing called? Just really deep in the
Hell.
shadows.
We were
No,
living a real version of hell in my life. Yeah, it's what it felt
Like the
like.
the dark night of the soul. Here you go, the dark night of the soul for like 5 years, you know, like really, really deep.
Yeah.
And then here we go when it's like you begin to surrender. And of course, you know, like we're talking in a way so lightly about it, but I'm sure that, you know, as you even show your emotions, there's nothing of what actually happened because we can't really see that
No, and
part
it
of
was so
you.
hard.
Yeah. And then
Right.
all of a
Well, you
sudden
have to
here
keep
you
in
are.
mind,
Hmm.
yeah, and spirit was there every step of the way
Yeah.
in the hospital rooms and the sensations I felt in my body and the conversations we had with nurses. But you have to keep in mind that we were extremely isolated during that 5 year time too. And so it was easier to go within, I think, because when we hung out with old friends, it was unrelatable. No one could understand what we were going through. And so it created this energy where like people didn't know what to say to us. And we didn't really care or give a shit about what they were talking about because we were living in this really hard thing when they were complaining about their kid getting their shoes on and before they go to school, right? Like it was just, we felt unrelatable and it's not their fault. Like their journeys were just as important.
Right.
But anytime I try to have a conversation with someone, they'd be like, well, it's nothing compared to what you're going through. And I found myself doing this thing that I've done
Mm.
my entire life where I make other people feel better. Where, but I would say, you know, pain is relevant. The sensation I feel when Bailey is in the hospital is the same sensation you feel when your child has a very high fever and you don't know what to do to help them.
Mm.
The pain and sensation isn't any different. It's just our threshold is higher because we've had to face different difficulties. But that doesn't negate the pain or the experience that somebody else is having. And so even though we were going through this really hard and unrelatable time, I still was there for my best friend and the situation she was going through. I was still there for my sister and the situation she was going through, and they were there for me as well. It just made our stories different,
Yeah.
and so still learn. I think that was a great skill to learn too, to still be able to hold space for people even when you're going through hard things. Um, because I learned that when you are in the deep root of grief and pain, you don't need someone to talk you out of it. You need someone to sit in it with you. You don't
Yeah.
need someone to fix
Gosh.
it. You don't
Yeah.
need someone to do anything than to hold you and tell you that you're doing a good job, that you're doing the best you can, and that they see you and your
Mm-hmm.
pain is valid. The
Mm-hmm.
importance of validating somebody's pain to be seen is so important.
And at the same
Um,
time, not to tell you, don't cry. You know, like it's literally a
yeah,
post that I did this morning that I was sharing with you before we recorded. That
yeah,
it's so important for us to let those feelings come through, right? Because again, we're creating space, we're letting go of the old and the power that the other person holds as they're holding space for you, just seeing you. Because it's not easy, you know, to hold like a dear one, whether they're just like crying their eyes out or maybe screaming, you know, like at the beginning might be really uncomfortable. But then you get to see the power and the
yeah,
beauty in that moment, like that deep connection that happens between two humans. You know, they're like, you're in your shit and I'm here and
yeah,
I love everything about you, no matter what you do.
right.
Wow.
And I'm here with you through it. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, that's kind of an instrumental piece in the story though, is summer coming in right when I was going to have to step away from peace, love, and yoga and the business I'd been building for a year and a half at that point. Um, but I needed to focus on my family and I felt that strongly. And I listened to that voice and spirit brought in Summer. She carried classes out through the summer, which is ironic. Her name is Summer.
I know, I was going to
Um,
say
and
that.
yeah, and then Bailey had surgery and then I did Reiki and then the aura scan class and the clarity that I needed to leave my job, Bailey getting on the autism waiver. It was all of these things started clicking, talking to my boss, letting her know that I was going to be leaving in December. I had planned on going through the end of the year. Then she told me about the layoff and I said, yeah, go ahead. I didn't know when it was going to happen. We didn't know if it was going to happen at that time. It was just a rumor. So I was working as if I was leaving in December, managing all of my projects at the time. I think I had 10, as if I were working through December and doing the best job that I could. Because I don't believe in doing things halfway. I believe that no matter what you do, you should give your all to it. Um, because that's important to how I navigate my life. I just give myself to whatever is in front of me.
Yeah.
Um, and then November, there was some random email and meeting that came through, and I jokingly sent an IM to my boss, and I was like, "Oh, is this it? Ha ha ha!" And she said yes, and I went, "Wait, what? This is it?" She said yes. I said, "But so and so's on here, so and so's on here, so and so's on here." It was a huge layoff.
Wow.
Um, I was hoping I would save people on my team by volunteering, and I didn't. They let 4 people go off of my team. We were a team of 8. So they cut us by 50% along with our supporting resources. I'd been there 10 years at that point, and a lot of the other people had been there 20 odd some years, like lifers. The company took good care of us,
Ooh,
great company to work with.
wow.
Um, but it was really sad.
Yeah.
And so what I was hoping would be exciting, which would be my like catalyst into my future, because I had enough saved up to do it on my own for 6 months. But the salary meant that I could do it on my own for a year. I wouldn't have to touch my savings. I'd be able to live off the severance for 6 months while I built my business. And then I'd have that 6 month cushion to try to make it. I was giving myself a year, which is coming up in November. It'll be my year. And I'm doing it.
And
But I
you're
was really
doing a great
scared.
job. Such a great
um,
job.
but I was scared. Um, I didn't expect it to happen then. And so it was a lot. Um, but it all balanced out. I jumped into peace, love, and yoga full time. My Reiki practice started to grow. The right customers were coming. I had a few other instructors come in to PLY. It's what we call peace, love, and yoga for short, because again, it's a mouthful. And then opportunity after opportunity came around. And yeah, it's just been this wild ride. But remember that trauma that came up for me, it triggered me, you guys. It made me question everything about myself. And I found out at the right time, because I was able, and I had that severance at the right time. And I thought it was to support me and my business financially, but it was so that I could give myself some space to heal the childhood trauma and to hold my inner child, and to acknowledge what I went through from the time I was really little until I was a preteen.
Mm,
And also heal my trauma with Bailey. I didn't realize I didn't realize how much healing I needed
mm,
until I left my job. And there was so much programming in me about my worth and my identity being
mhm.
tied to how much money I make.
Yeah.
I'm
Oof.
still working through that one, especially in this
Mm,
economy. But spiritual awakening after spiritual awakening after spiritual awakening, my psychic abilities started to open up.
mhm.
My empathic abilities that I've had since I was a child, and ways that I used my empath abilities to survive my whole life, I did not know until last year. So that means that I was navigating 34 years of my life, feeling everyone's emotions in the present moment, readapting myself to be what they needed in that moment. It was like a chameleon. I would match your energy, um, which felt natural to me, right? And I could feel what other people were feeling, and because of that, I was able to console them. I'm a good listener. I mean, people like to be around me. They like to share with me their problems, and none of that clicked. None of it really clicked until I became a healer and I started learning more about being an empath. And I was leaky. My energy was leaky, and there were energy vampires, and I had things attached to my auric field. And so I started working
Oof.
with clearing that out. I started learning how to protect my aura and strengthening my aura and healing my blocks and healing my past traumas, not only of this life but my past lives. I got, I am really into it. And I know it's not me. I know it's not like my ability. It's spirit, and it's the quality of which I allow that to come through me. But it feels like magic. It feels like such a sparkly gift to be in this space, to be able to hold space for others, to see the benefits in their life, and to call this my job. Um,
Mm.
it's still weird for me. It's still new. The financial part, I'm not going to lie to anybody that is in this field. Rukmani, you can attest to this, I'm sure. The financial piece of this industry is scary,
It's so fucking
especially in this
scary.
economic time, because
Yeah.
yoga, meditation, those are things people throw those things out the window when money starts getting hard. And so I'm a left brain person. I am analytical. I am strong business sense. I'm rooted. I am grounded. I am good with finances. Like, I'm all of those things. And I'm still in this industry and learning to trust, learning to surrender. Those are messages that keep coming up for me. And it's hard. And doing your own healing work of yourself while stepping in and helping others heal is hard. Because I take my job very seriously. I'll say it again, I give myself 100% into whatever I'm doing. But to be the healer that I aspire to be, and I hope that I am, means that I have
You
to be
are.
willing to do my own work.
Mm.
Um,
I mean,
and
I just really
doing
want to
that
take a
work's hard.
moment to say that again because I honor you so much. Thank you for saying that, like being the healer means that you have to do your own healing, right? And the work.
Yeah.
Because like there's so many things in spiritual communities, and I have witnessed this too, just taking a step back, that there's a lot of like people that call themselves healers and they don't really do the work, right? Or they might do the work in a really small kind of amount,
Mm-hmm.
but then rather than helping others, they don't really know how to help others because they don't really know how to help themselves. And
Yeah.
then like this thing like doesn't really work if you don't know how to hold space for yourself, and then here
Right.
comes somebody else in a very vulnerable state, and rather than helping them, maybe you're just helping them to go lower, so it's such an important. I find this such is for me is such a like very gentle and a very like touchy topic because I
Mm-hmm.
have been there, and at the same time because I know, like what I teach, what I really like teach my clients, how the way I mentor is because I mentor myself, because I learn all these things and I figure out that this is how I could do it for myself, and if it works for myself, it's gonna work for somebody else, maybe not for everybody, but I don't teach things that I haven't tried myself, because then how could I teach those things? I don't know if they work. And so I thank you for saying that. Thank you that, like, yes, you're holding space for others, which means that you gotta hold space for yourself and doing the work for you, which is not
Yeah.
easy at all.
It's not. And it's interesting. I find this work fascinating.
Mm,
Like, I find the human body, the human brain, metaphysics. I actually would like to be a metaphysician, to be honest with you, just to learn more about it, and science and spirit and how we can work together. It's so interesting. And I wish I would have known this. Like, I wish this stuff was educated in the school system, because a
oh
lot
my
of
gosh,
people think
yes.
that spirituality is tied to religion. And it's not. It's not tied to one religion. Like, I'm still a Christian. I still believe in Jesus. I still believe in God. I just have a different appreciation for that love and able to
Hmm.
share that. It's like, to me, it's almost like embodying what is spoke about in the Bible about the way Jesus loved others. I am literally just channeling that
Yes.
love into people and allowing them to be who they are. And at first, when I first started, I felt like, oh, okay, I need to make sure that I get this download, or I have a vision. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform as in a certain way of what a healer could look like. Um, but what I've realized is my goal, and I hope any healer's goal, is not to be able to tell your client um, what to do, but to hold space for them so that they come to that realization on their own. And that could be asking thought provoking questions if you see that they're in a certain space, but they're not quite ready to face it yet. But it could also mean letting them not be ready to face it yet. Like, it isn't our job to be like, no, this is what you're going through. It's about activating that inner healer within them. And once
Totally.
I kind of really clicked with that, it took the pressure off of me. And I'm just the channel. I'm going to create a really nice space for them. I'm going to tune into what essential oils would make them feel really good, and listen to their favorite colors, and understand maybe what meditation would be best for them. Like, I love to cater experiences and healing practices with the individual.
Yes.
um, but at the end, I love hearing the realizations they have through a session. I love hearing through a yoga class that the words that I chose to speak, where I had no idea why, really spoke to a person, and it was exactly
Yeah.
what they needed to hear that day. I've really began to trust myself and my own intuition. And I love hearing people say how much it helps them.
Hmm.
Um, and you can't put a price point to that.
No, you
And
can't.
yeah, and so I do get a little nervous and get stuck in scarcity mindset sometimes. Again, the economy right now is brutal for anybody.
And I think that's
Um,
normal, you know?
yeah,
I think that's normal, especially at the beginning of the
yeah,
journey. I mean,
it's
I'm
normal
not
and
even
it's
not joke at
necessary.
all, you know, like
I think it's a
I
piece
was
of my
still,
healing journey.
yeah, like no joke, I was still in somewhat, you
Hmm.
know, on and off on that scarcity mindset until I had this awakening on the Lionsgate portal where, you
Yep.
know, where I heard that message saying like you are the heart alchemist. And ever since then it's like I trust your heart. And it's
Yeah.
just opening up many things, you know, and I'm not just talking from this planet, like from other galaxies. And just
Yeah.
saying like, yeah, you know, and but it's like, and you know, I've been in this journey since started to enter this journey since like at the beginning of this depression in 2011, you know, so it's been a while.
Hmm.
And I think it's
Hmm.
just it really depends, and it can come on and off, on and off. And it's really great that, you know, you acknowledge that and you say, so there's no like that, in a way, putting a wall in between, you know, it's like, hey, this is my experience and that's okay, you know, and you're still growing. I mean, your
Yeah.
business is fairly new, right? So in a way, it's a
Yeah.
spiritual
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of my babies. And here's the
Mhm.
thing, that's another part of this. Like, I'm still a mom, I'm still a wife.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of sacrifice that comes from this industry. Clients you see in the evenings and on weekends. And that's my time with my family. And so there's a really delicate balance between saying yes to a customer and choosing to be with my family. Because there's always my ego in the background and the scarcity mentality that I have to say, shh, thank you, but shh, not right now. I'm choosing to be with my family. Because if I'm saying no to a client, it means I'm saying no to money. And finding that balance and maintaining that balance, because that was one of my biggest motivators. It's like, I want to pursue my passion and show my daughters that you can say yes to yourself, you can raise a family, and you can follow your dreams.
Mm,
um
yes.
I wanted to show them that it's okay to do that, and that it's not selfish, and they're my
Mhm.
reason. But when I feel like I start teetering and that workaholic mentality, the perfectionist, result driver starts to come forward, which I love her, by the way. I love that piece of myself. She makes me feel very powerful. But she
I
has a
feel you.
tendency, yeah, but she has a tendency to be a little overzealous, and it's dangerous and reckless sometimes. So I have like this like spiritual hippie Lindsay that's very loving and floaty, and she needs to come down to earth sometimes, and so they balance each other out. I've got like two versions of me living in here, and I channel them both. And I appreciate them both. But when I get a little too action of doing, when I get a little too masculine, I have to realize that, and I look at my girls,
Mm,
and I cannot get this time back from them. Moms, wherever you are in your journey, you cannot get this time back with your babies. And my oldest is almost 12, and I've really
wow.
watched her shift and change over the last 2 years. And I have a lot of grief there about the 5 year black hole of Bailey's existence, and how much I missed, and how much got stripped away, habits that formed, but I can't change that. I did the best I could. I wish I would have done things a little differently then. I'm not the same person I was then. And I wish I knew then what I know now, but I didn't. And I can only learn from that. So every day I have this practice of looking at my calendar and making sure that my priorities are still in alignment with the intentions I wrote in my journal when I decided to leave my corporate job.
Mm.
And to me, the number one thing is the type of mom I want to be. I don't want to be the mom that's scattered and stressed out and not fully present with her kids, too busy to go to their field trips or too busy to bring them a lunch when they forget something at school. I don't want to be the mom that, struggles to do homework with their kids because they're drained from their day.
Mm-hmm.
And I still get those places, like all of those things I'm describing, I have felt and been in it hundreds of times. And that's my way of going, okay, something's out of alignment because I'm not functioning the way that I choose to function. I'm not being the intentional mom that I choose to be. As a matter of fact, I'm going through that right now. Like I lean too heavy into the act of doing, which comes from my scarcity mindset, right? From that fear of not having enough. So I'm recalibrating. So I look at my calendar every day and I go, am I following my intentions? Do I have space for myself? Do I have space to be the mom that I want to be? And if the answer is no, I relook at my calendar. I
Mm.
have to do what feels right in my heart space. And sometimes that means rescheduling clients.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means saying no to my kids. It's really just about navigating with an intentional heart and mind and trying not to let the monster of money change and drive the way that I am navigating my day, whether that's saying yes to a client when I want to say no, or when it's saying yes to a client when I want to say yes. And knowing that my kids are going to be okay, but it's about balance. For me, I feel that I am out of balance. I have to take a step back and just ask myself, what is a need and what can I let go of? Because I just don't want to ever end up in that same space that I was in when I was spinning all those different plates and torn in multiple directions at the same time. I just try to be very present where I'm at in every moment. And that is what I try to coach my clients with, and navigating it from a place of personal power, of being authentic to yourself and trusting what you're feeling and letting your body guide you, because when you're doing something that maybe you shouldn't, when you've made a decision that pushes you over the edge, you feel it in your body. Maybe you
Mm.
haven't recognized that yet, but you do. And once you recognize the sensation, you can use that as your guide, um, to help you navigate your day in a way where you do want to feel balanced. Because once you find that sense of balance and peace, you know what it feels like. So you know when you've deviated outside of that.
And that's so powerful, like, I mean, especially, of course, for mothers. And um, I'm not a human mother yet. I like to say, I have a puppy, so you can see in the video. And of course,
Yeah.
I'm a partner, right? And also, like, I believe that, in my experience, at least, first, the most important partner in my life is myself. And so then it's like
Yeah.
very similar, right? So, like, am I actually showing up in the relationship how I want to show up? Am I present with my partner? Am I present with myself? Am I present with my family? And it really will come down into, like, okay, am I going to regret this, this period of my life
Right.
when I'm on my deathbed,
Right.
right? Am I going to be thinking
Right.
there's like, shit, I should have done this and that and that and that. And that's how I live my life. It's like, no, I don't want to regret it. I had so many regrets prior to, like, this whole spiritual awakening, that I had to work through and let go. So now it's like, how do I choose to not have those regrets? How do I choose to live my life so I don't have those kind of regrets, right? And sometimes it's like what you said, in the same time, the body is so intelligent that even, like,
Mm-hmm.
almost this whole year for me, the body has been, you slow down, having this like thing with my health and this other thing and this surgery and now another surgery. It's like, this year is like, yes, the initiation, because I'm on my year 1 of the 9-year cycle, but also obviously still cutting the endings of the previous cycle and still being okay with, like, what I'm doing and still trusting, right? Like that big thing,
Yeah.
trusting that everything's gonna be okay, that I am super provided, that I can trust like the flow of my heart and what I have been putting out to also come back into me in this kind of period. And for a lot of people, it can be super challenging and scary. At
Yeah.
times it is scary
Yeah.
for sure.
It's terrifying. And it's also not how we are programmed to be. And so I don't listen to the news. I don't listen to the
Hmm.
radio. I don't watch commercials.
Hmm.
I do watch TV. I like Netflix. I like binge watching Netflix here and there. Like I'm definitely, I'm all for a binging Netflix and a cozy blanket kind of day. I just
Yeah.
avoid listening to the news because there's so many scare tactics out
Oh
there.
my
And yeah,
gosh,
things are
yes.
getting really expensive. But what I've noticed is when you're intentional, and I think that's really what it's about. It's about having intention because we're making a lot less money than we used to. And even then, we would still be like, damn, how did we spend all that? But you do. And it doesn't really seem no matter how much you have, you're going to spend it unless you're intentional about saving it.
Hmm.
And so for us, we're just really intentional about how we look at it all and where it's going to go. And yeah, sure, sometimes we overspend, but then you know what? Then the next month we underspend. Right? I don't know. It's balancing somehow. Um, and so for me, it's about continuing to strengthen that muscle. I have this thing where I talk to my kids about patience, and I'm like, you have to think of it as muscle. It's something that we have to strengthen within ourselves, and trust is the same way. So patience and trust, they're muscles, and we have to work them. And sometimes we're going to be sore and tired from working that muscle, and other times it's going to come more easy and naturally. But we
Yeah.
have to continue to practice patience. We have to continue to practice trust, even when we get scared, acknowledging the fear. Where is that fear coming from? Chances are that fear is something you learned and isn't true in this situation. They have this, I can't remember where I heard this, but I'm going to quote it anyways because it was really powerful for me.
Go ahead.
So the mind and the ego will always choose the hell it knows over the heaven that it doesn't.
Mm.
Our central nervous system and our body would rather you stay in a dead end job that meets your needs and is safe than jumping off the cliff to pursue something different, even though it might be better for you, even though it might even work out way better than you could have ever imagined.
Mm-hmm.
We're still going to choose the hell we know over the heaven we don't, because that is how we are programmed.
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
But if more
Crazy.
of us said yes to
Dang.
ourselves and saw how often we land on our feet, imagine what that world would look like.
Oh yeah. And it's so intense when the place of the mind gets super activated. And this is like
Yeah.
really happened to me yesterday. Because sometimes it's not just like your own fear, but also what the feels in the collective, and even
Yeah.
from other lifetimes that are passing through, right? So I went to teach Kundalini yoga yesterday, and I was staying to take the class after, and I had left the slow cooker to make potatoes. And I'm in the middle of teaching Kundalini yoga, which is like, to me, is such a like powerful way of like channeling to others too. I love teaching
Mhm.
this class. And then I get like this thing in my head. What if, I'm not even joking, what if the house explodes because you left like this slow cooker on, and also your puppy explodes with the house? And I'm like Zeus is, gosh, he's like my child to me, but not
He's your
only that,
baby.
yeah, and at the same time, he's my emotional support dog, like animal, and it's like everything. We've had lifetimes together. So then, like, I was like having this panicking thing, and I'm like, there's no way I can stay for slow flow after this. I have to go. And then I was like, hey, relax, be here, present with the students, and see what happens after. And of course, like maybe like we started the final meditation, maybe 2 minutes into it, gone. But it's crazy, because then you totally believed it. You like, I mean, I saw it in my eye, and like my whole body was like, oh shit. And it's wild. And maybe a lot of
Well,
people
hold
don't
on
really
though.
have. Hmm.
Let's stay there for just a second. So I don't know what all you've shared on your podcast, but in your journey and in your past lifetimes, there was fire, there was explosions, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I was in wars and I died on like falling in my
Yeah,
head. This is why I like when I started to practice
right.
headstands, I mean, it
So
took me like 2 years to actually be in that because I was too afraid of being in that.
yeah, I'm afraid of inversions too. That's another topic. I can't, yeah, way in my head about that. But regarding like the thought of the explosion, and I'm sure part of you started judging yourself, like this is such an irrational thought.
Yeah, I was like, this doesn't make sense because I've done it before, like putting the slow cooker on, had to like
Right.
go do something, and Zeus was saying here and the whole deal, but it's just like that like motherly part was like, oh shit, you need to go right now. What if it's actually
Yeah.
happening? And I'm like, breathe. You're teaching right now. You're
Right.
holding space for others. And yeah, and it's still like it's like a recorder thing on your system that gets activated and is
Mhm.
felt like it's actually happening.
But what a
So wild.
gift that you were able to process through it the way you did, because for the audience, the way healing works, things come up like that thought process. And for her, she could have shut that down in that moment and thought of herself as being irrational or overthinking it, or I'm so stupid, all of those negative self talks that can come through. And I'm not saying they didn't. Like you may have had a moment where you're like, why
Hmm.
am I thinking this? This is irrational. But what she didn't do was let it control her behavior. She was
Mm.
able to identify the thought process as it was happening while still performing what she's doing. And these things happen in a split second. We have thoughts constantly all the time. And she literally could have done this and she could have said, I'm done with this class. I'm going to go home, check on my dog, check on my
Yeah.
potatoes, and have my moment. But she didn't let it control her behavior. And she stuck with the commitment that she'd given herself, which is, I'm going to receive after I give today, which, by the way, as a healer, that's one of the most powerful things you can do is after
Hmm.
you've given is to find a way to receive, to keep the scales balanced within your body, your
Hmm.
mind, and this in the spirit. But what I love is that because you didn't let that control you, you were able to heal that. You stopped, you listened, you felt it, you acknowledged it, you didn't shut it down. You said, but I'm going to do this anyways. And then you went
Hmm.
home and everything was okay. I'm sure you
Yeah.
felt that sense of relief, but then you may have also felt the power of still loving yourself despite your fear.
Yeah. And let me tell you, it was so fucking scary because these things don't really happen to me. I think it only in the past, like maybe 4 years, it has happened one time too, when I just created stories about my mom not picking up the phone. And I mean, it's just like, this doesn't, it's not my normality. And so I know that something is coming through, but when it comes through, wow, it felt so deeply to the point that it's just like my heartbeat was like this, and I was like, okay, you just need to breathe and just to be here. And yeah, I ended up getting home and it was fine, and I was blissed out from yoga, so that was good.
Yeah, you were amazing. But what a powerful moment to get to heal some past trauma, not even from this life, but from a previous one.
Yeah. So wow, we've been speaking for almost 2 hours, honestly.
Oh. And there's
And I'm
so much
sure
more that can be shared, I'm
so
sure.
much more, so much more. But I wanted to
Uh,
see if there's something, some kind of wisdom nugget that you would like to give the audience before we cut this beautiful transmission.
yeah, definitely. Um, I think I think that everybody has this own internal knowing that we tend to shut off. And if there's anything I've learned through my journey so far, is that I need to listen to that inner voice and that inner knowing, even if doctors are telling me no, I was right. Even if my husband doesn't see the reason behind me wanting to quit my job, like sitting him down and telling him that was really hard, that's a whole nother story. But doing it anyways. Listen to your internal knowing, because the more you listen to it, the stronger it gets. And you will be so surprised how true that inner voice really is. And it may not always make sense, it may not always be crystal clear why you're feeling a certain way to say no to something or say yes to something. But if you honor that, that is the thing I have learned is if you honor and listen to that inner voice, the answers will come to you.
Mm,
And the unknown can be even more beautiful than you'd ever imagined.
totally. Totally. Wow. Thank you. And thank you one more time for being you here with all of us, and just like literally just being you, just showing as
Mm,
you are and with all your feels and your whole story. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you follow that guidance and then we got to meet, and I'm look
yeah.
forward, to continue to get to know each other and see what happens, see what comes through, and
Oh,
what a
yeah.
blessing you are to your community, and not just to the community, because this expands, goodness, talking about energetics, this expands all throughout the whole freaking universe. So thank you for that. I'm so grateful.
Yes. Maybe
So
next time we
grateful.
can do an episode on light language because we didn't even talk about that.
Yes, yes,
That
yeah.
activation. Yeah.
Yes, please, let's do it. Yes, I'm on board.
Well, thank you
Mm,
for allowing me and giving me the opportunity to come on here. It was
of
so
course.
fun
Of
and
course, yes.
therapeutic and anytime. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
you and what you're doing and anything I can do to help or to be part of it. Just anything. I love it.
Thank you. And well, thank you everybody for tapping into this episode. And let's just close the space. And same thing as how we open it up. So again, I invite you to close your eyes if that feels safe for you. Let's take a deep inhale through the nose. Exhale through the nose. And again, deep inhale through the nose. This time let's exhale through the mouth. Okay, last time, deep inhale. And exhale. And just staying with the eyes closed in your own presence, in your own field, with all your feelings, with the power of what it is to be you, what it feels like to be you. I'm having so much gratitude for this space. The space where we all come together and co-create. The space where we're not different from one another. The space of oneness, totality, and beyond that, nothingness. Let's take another deep inhale through the nose. Hold the breath. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And exhale whenever you're ready. And whenever you're ready, you can
Thank
open up
you.
your
It was
eyes.
such an honor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So grateful, so grateful. And I'll see you next time. Yeah, peace.
Namaste.